The radio crackled to life at 2:17 a.m., shattering the mountain silence like glass. Colt Brennan's eyes snapped open in the darkness of his cabin. Not the slow surfacing of normal sleep, but the instant combat alertness drilled into him over 22 years as a Navy SEAL. His right hand moved automatically toward the nightstand where his Glock 19 rested, fingers finding the grip before his conscious mind fully engaged. The emergency frequency hissed static and fragments of a voice. Broken. Desperate. Female. Mayday. SEAL team. Coordinates 47902. Ambush. Multiple casualties. Then nothing. Just the empty whisper of dead air. Colt sat motionless on the edge of his bed, bare feet on the cold wood floor. His breath misted in the unheated room. January in the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness didn't forgive, didn't compromise. The thermometer outside read 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, maybe 35. He was 52 years old. His right shoulder ached where Taliban shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone in Kandahar 12 years ago. His hands showed the fine tremor that lived there now, a souvenir from Fallujah that no amount of breathing exercises could completely erase. But his mind remained sharp as the combat knife he'd carried through 4 war zones. The radio signal had come from close. Very close. Maybe 5 miles, maybe less. A low growl rumbled from the corner of the room. Phantom, his 7-year-old German shepherd, stood rigid by the door. The dog's muscular frame was silhouetted against the window where moonlight filtered through falling snow. His ears stood fully erect, rotating like radar dishes. His tail was level, not wagging. His hackles rose along his spine in a distinctive ridge. This wasn't the posture of a dog hearing a deer or elk. This was a military working dog detecting a threat. Colt had received Phantom 2 years ago from Iris Calloway, an old friend from his Army liaison days. The dog's previous handler, Chief Petty Officer Lucas Graves, had been killed by an IED outside Kandahar in 2021. Phantom had been there when it happened. The blast had broken his left rear leg and shattered something deeper, something that couldn't be fixed with surgery and physical therapy. Iris had connections with the Navy's K-9 program. She'd arranged for Phantom to be retired early and placed with Colt. "You both need each other," she'd said. "You both understand what it means to come home when part of you is still over there." She'd been right. Colt stood and moved to the window. His body protested the stiffness of middle age and old injuries competing with ingrained muscle memory. He pulled on worn Levi's over his thermal underwear, shrugged into a flannel shirt that had seen better decades, and reached for his Carhartt jacket. The canvas was stiff with age and waterproofing the elbows patched with duct tape. Outside, the blizzard that had been threatening all evening had arrived in full force. Snow fell in thick curtains driven sideways by wind that howled through the pines. Visibility was maybe 20 yards. Beyond that, just white chaos. Phantom whined once, sharp and urgent. Colt grabbed his Remington 700 from the rack above the door. The rifle was more than a tool. It was an extension of his body, carried and maintained with religious devotion since his first tour as a scout sniper. 308 Winchester hand-loaded rounds. Leupold scope that had never failed him. He checked the chamber with muscle memory, his hands performing the ritual even as his eyes scanned the darkness beyond the window. The tremor in his fingers was barely noticeable now. Focus always steadied them. Combat breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold, repeat. The technique had saved his life more times than he could count. In Fallujah, when the IED had detonated 15 feet from his position and the world became nothing but ringing silence and copper-tasting panic. In Kandahar, when the Taliban had pinned his team in a kill zone and his hands had shaken so badly he thought he'd never fire again. The breathing always brought him back. He clipped a tactical flashlight to his belt, pocketed extra magazines for both the Glock and the Remington, and pulled on his Dana boots. The leather was cracked and salt-stained, the tread worn smooth in places, but they'd carried him through worse than a Montana blizzard. Phantom was already at the door, body coiled with professional tension. No barking, no unnecessary noise, just focused readiness. Colt opened the door and stepped into the storm. The wind hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath and driving snow into his face with stinging force. The temperature had dropped further. 5 degrees, maybe less. With the wind chill, it was well below zero. Exposed skin would develop frostbite in minutes. He pulled his wool cap lower and brought a bandana up over his nose and mouth. His eyes watered immediately and the cold tears freezing on his eyelashes. Phantom moved ahead, nose to the ground despite the accumulating snow. The dog's training overrode his age and injury. He swept left, then right, quartering the area with professional efficiency. His breath came in rapid clouds of vapor. Colt followed rifle ready but pointed low. His eyes scanned the tree line in sectors the way he'd done 1,000 times on patrol. Clear left, clear right, clear center. Repeat. Trust your training. Trust your instincts. Trust your dog. Phantom stopped abruptly 30 yards from the cabin. The dog's body went rigid. His nose pointed northeast toward the dense pine forest that climbed toward the ridgeline. A growl started deep in his chest, barely audible over the wind. Not the warning growl for an animal, the combat alert for human presence. Colt moved up beside him, following the dog's line of sight. At first he saw nothing. Just snow and shadows and the skeletal forms of pine trees bending under the wind. Then his eyes caught it. A darker patch in the white. Wrong shape. Wrong texture. Blood. Not a few drops. A trail. Dark crimson against pristine snow, already being covered by the fresh fall but still visible. The pattern was distinctive. Not the spray of a wounded animal, but the steady drip of a human injury. Someone bleeding badly. Someone moving, but not fast. Colt knelt beside the trail. His gloved hand touched the snow near the blood. Still warm. Very recent. Within the last 10 minutes, maybe less. He looked closer at the depression in the snow beside the blood trail. A boot print. Small. Size 8, maybe 8.5. Tactical tread pattern. Military issue. The kind of boot a Navy SEAL might wear. His heart rate increased. Not panic. Just the heightened alertness that came before contact. His fingers found his Glock, automatically checking that it was loose in its holster. The Remington felt heavy and reassuring in his hands. Phantom moved forward, following the trail. His limp was more pronounced in the deep snow. The left rear leg where the IED shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone 3 years ago. The leg that ached in cold weather and sometimes gave out completely after too much exertion. But the dog pushed forward professional despite the pain. Colt followed weapon ready. The blood trail led northeast deeper into the forest and up the gradual slope toward the ridgeline. Whoever had passed this way was heading away from civilization, away from the nearest road, away from help. Either they didn't know the terrain, or they were running from something worse than the wilderness. The wind shifted, bringing a new sound. Faint, almost lost in the storm. But Colt's hearing, though, damaged by years of gunfire and explosions, still caught it. Labored breathing, human, close. Phantom heard it too. His ears swiveled forward, his pace increased despite his injury. 50 yards ahead, a shape emerged from the white chaos. A figure slumped against the base of a massive ponderosa pine, unmoving except for the slight rise and fall of shallow breathing. Colt approached with tactical caution. Clear left, clear right. Check 6. Trust nothing. The figure could be bait. An ambush. A trick. But as he got closer, details resolved through the falling snow. A woman. Young. Maybe late 20s, early 30s. Her full-body digital camouflage combat suit was torn and blood-soaked. A tactical vest hung loose on her torso, several pouches empty or damaged. Her helmet was gone. Her dark brown hair was matted with blood and snow. Her face was pale lips blue with cold and blood loss. But what made Colt's breath catch was the patch on her left shoulder, barely visible under the blood and torn fabric. A Navy SEAL trident. He'd seen that insignia on his own uniforms for more than 2 decades. The eagle, the anchor, the trident, the flintlock pistol. The symbol worn by fewer than 3,000 people in the entire world. The mark of someone who had endured Hell Week dive school land warfare training and countless other crucibles that broke 90% of the candidates who tried. This woman had earned that patch. And now she was dying alone in a Montana blizzard. Colt dropped to one knee beside her rifle slung across his back. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking for life-threatening injuries. ABC, airway breathing circulation. The foundational priorities drilled into every SEAL, every soldier, every person who might need to keep someone alive in a combat zone. Airway clear, breathing shallow but present, circulation weak. The blood was coming from her right shoulder and left side. Gunshot wounds, through and through on the shoulder. The side wound was worse, probably a ribs injury, possibly touching the lung. She needed a hospital. She needed it an hour ago. Her eyes fluttered open. Grey-blue irises clouded with pain and shock. They focused on him with difficulty. "Help!" Her voice was barely a whisper lost in the wind. "I've got you," Colt said. His voice was steady, commanding, the voice that had led men through firefights and ambushes. "You're going to be okay. What's your name?" "Quinn. Lieutenant Harper Quinn. SEAL Team 5. SEAL Team 5. West Coast based. Out of Coronado, California. More than 1,000 miles from Montana. What happened, Lieutenant? Her hand grabbed his jacket with surprising strength. Ambush! Mission compromised. Insider! She coughed a wet sound that made Colt's jaw tighten. Blood on her lips. Don't trust anyone. They know. Who knows? Who did this? But her eyes were closing again. Her hand went slack. Her breathing became more labored. No time for questions. She was going into shock. Maybe already there. In this cold with these injuries, she had maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia and blood loss made survival impossible. Colt looked around. His cabin was 3 miles behind him. Too far to carry someone in this condition through deep snow, but Iris and Wade Calloway's place was closer, maybe a mile and a half northeast over the ridge. He could make that. He pulled out his satellite phone. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. 1 bar of signal. Enough. He dialed Iris's number. It rang 3 times before her voice answered alert despite the hour. Old soldiers never really slept deeply. Colt, what's wrong? I'm bringing you a patient. Gunshot wounds, hypothermia shock, female late 20s, Navy SEAL. I'll be there in 40 minutes. There was a pause. Iris Calloway had been a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne for 20 years. She'd treated everything from gunshot wounds to sucking chest wounds to traumatic amputations in field conditions that would make most civilian doctors quit medicine. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. I'll be ready. Wade's starting the generator now. Bring her through the back door. I'll have the table cleared. Roger. He ended the call and looked at Harper Quinn. She was unconscious now, maybe better that way. Pain was the body's warning system, but right now she needed to conserve every ounce of energy for survival. Colt shrugged out of his jacket and wrapped it around her. His thermal layers would have to be enough. He couldn't afford for her to lose more body heat. He lifted her in a fireman's carry, her weight settling across his shoulders. Maybe 130, 140 pounds, plus 40 pounds of gear. Not light, but manageable. Old shrapnel wounds flared with every movement. He ignored it. Phantom watched him, head tilted in concern. Let's move, boy. We've got a long walk. The dog turned and started back the way they'd come, limping, but determined. Colt followed, carrying Harper Quinn through the storm. Each step was a negotiation between forward momentum and maintaining balance in the deep snow. His boots sank 8, 10, 12 inches with every stride. His breath came harder. Not from exertion yet, but from the altitude and the weight and the cold air burning his lungs. He focused on Phantom's dark shape ahead. The dog knew the way home, could navigate this terrain in any weather. Trust the dog. Trust the training. Keep moving. The wind picked up, gusting to 30, 40 miles per hour. Snow stung his exposed face like needles. His eyes watered constantly. His beard, grey-shot brown, accumulated ice from his frozen breath. Harper Quinn's blood soaked through his thermal shirt, warm at first, then cold as it froze. 10 minutes, 20, 30. Pain radiated from his shoulder with each step. His legs burned from fighting through the snow. His lungs ached from breathing air cold enough to cause damage. But he'd carried wounded men further than this. In heat that would kill unacclimatized troops in hours. In mud that sucked at boots like quicksand. Through enemy fire and over terrain that barely qualified as navigable. This was Montana in winter. He'd survived worse. 40 minutes after leaving, the blood trail lights appeared ahead. The Calloway cabin windows glowing warm yellow against the storm. Smoke rose from the chimney, immediately shredded by the wind. Phantom limped up onto the porch and scratched at the door. It opened before Colt reached the steps. Iris Calloway stood backlit in the doorway. She was 57, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face lined with the weathering of 2 decades in war zones and another 20 in Montana wilderness. She wore green scrubs and a headlamp. Her grey eyes took in the situation in one professional sweep. Inside, now! Colt carried Harper through the door. Wade Calloway, Iris's husband, stood ready to help. At 61, Wade still had the broad shoulders and powerful build of the wildland firefighter he'd been for 33 years. His beard was fully white now, his hands scarred from burns and accidents, but his hazel eyes were sharp and alert. Table's ready, Wade said. Generators running. We've got hot water and full lights. The cabin's main room had been transformed into a field hospital. The large oak table was covered with clean sheets. Medical supplies covered every nearby surface. Bandages, IV bags, surgical tools, bottles of saline and antibiotics and pain medication. The collection of 2 decades of preparation for emergencies that could happen when the nearest hospital was 70 miles of mountain roads away. Colt laid Harper on the table as gently as he could. Iris moved immediately to her side, hands already checking cataloguing injuries with professional speed. "GSW, right shoulder through and through, missed major arteries," Iris muttered more to herself than anyone else. "GSW, left side, possible rib damage, possible lung involvement. Hypothermia, moderate to severe. Shock advanced. BP is going to be in the basement." She looked up at Colt. "You said Navy SEAL?" "Lieutenant Harper Quinn, SEAL Team 5. She said there was an ambush. Mission compromised. Insider threat. She said don't trust anyone." Iris's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Understanding. Concern. Wade had moved to the windows, checking the perimeter with the instincts of someone who'd spent a career reading fire behavior and terrain. If she was being hunted, they might have followed her trail, or your trail carrying her. Colt nodded. He'd already thought of that. The blood trail he'd left carrying Harper would be visible to anyone with tracking skills, even in the storm. And if someone had ambushed a SEAL team, they had tracking skills. "We need to prepare for company," he said. Phantom had collapsed near the wood stove, steam rising from his wet fur. The dog's left rear leg was extended stiffly. He'd pushed too hard tonight. The old injury was swelling. Iris glanced at the dog, then at Colt. "Wade, get the dog kit. He needs anti-inflammatory and ice on that leg. Colt, you're bleeding." Colt looked down. He hadn't noticed. A tear in his thermal shirt, a shallow cut along his ribs from where Harper's tactical vest had rubbed during the carry. Not serious. Not even worth mentioning. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding on my floor. Sit down and let me look at it after I stabilize her." It wasn't a request. Iris Calloway had pulled rank on generals. A retired SEAL didn't intimidate her. Colt moved to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Nothing moved in the white chaos. But that didn't mean nothing was there. Harper Quinn groaned on the table. Iris had cut away her torn uniform, exposing the wounds. The shoulder injury was clean through the meat of the deltoid missing bone. Painful but survivable. The side wound was worse. 2 ribs broken, possibly 3. The bullet had torn through muscle and tissue, might have nicked the lung. Blood in her breathing confirmed it. "I need to seal this lung," Iris said. "Wade, get me the chest seal kit. Colt, I need you to hold her steady. This is going to hurt, and she might wake up fighting." Colt moved to the table, placing his hands on Harper's uninjured shoulder and hip. Her skin was ice cold, her pulse thready and weak. Her lips were blue, her fingers showed early signs of frostbite. Iris worked with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times under worse conditions. The chest seal went on creating an airtight barrier over the wound. Harper's breathing immediately improved, becoming less laboured. Next came the IV. 2 of them, both lines running Ringer's lactate to replace lost blood volume and combat shock. Antibiotics to prevent infection. Pain medication carefully calibrated to manage agony without suppressing respiratory function. Bandages on the shoulder. Splinting of the broken ribs. Warming blankets from the drier layer after layer, fighting the hypothermia that could kill her as surely as the bullets. Wade brought the dog kit to Phantom. The shepherd lifted his head but didn't resist as Wade examined the swollen leg, administered medication, and applied cold packs wrapped in towels. The dog's amber eyes found Colt across the room. Trust. Partnership. Brotherhood. 30 minutes later, Iris stepped back from the table. Her scrubs were blood-stained. Her face was professionally neutral, but Colt knew her well enough to read the concern there. "She's stable, for now. She's lost a lot of blood. The lung injury needs a hospital. The hypothermia is still dangerous, but she might make it if we can keep her warm and watch for complications." "How long before she can travel?" "She can't. Not for days. Maybe a week. Moving her now would kill her." Colt nodded. He'd expected that answer, which meant they were committed. Harper Quinn was their responsibility now, and whoever had tried to kill her would be looking. He pulled out the GPS unit he'd found at the blood trail. Navy issue encrypted, showing coordinates and route data. Someone else's mission planning. Someone else's secrets. "She said not to trust anyone," Colt said quietly. "She said there was an insider. If we call for help, we might be calling the people who did this." Iris looked at Wade. A silent conversation passed between them, the kind that only happened after 40 years of marriage and partnership. Wade nodded slightly. "Then we don't call anyone," Iris said. "We handle this ourselves, just like the old days." The old days. When problems couldn't be solved with phone calls and official channels. When survival depended on skills and trust, and the willingness to make hard choices. Colt looked down at Harper Quinn's unconscious form. So young, so broken, fighting for her life on a table in a Montana cabin because someone she trusted had betrayed her team. He knew that feeling, the violation of betrayal, the rage that came with knowing someone on your side had sold you out. He'd felt it before in other wars, other missions. "We need to know what we're dealing with," he said. "I'm going back to the blood trail, see if I can find her gear, her radio, anything that might tell us who did this." "In this storm," Wade shook his head, "you'll freeze or get lost."
"I've navigated worse, and we need information. If someone's coming, I want to know who and how many." Phantom struggled to his feet, limping toward Colt, ready to go despite the pain and exhaustion. "No, boy. You stay. Guard." The dog hesitated, then settled back down near the stove. His eyes never left Colt. Iris handed Colt his jacket, now dried and warmed. 2 hours. If you're not back in 2 hours, I'm calling the cavalry. Roger." Colt checked his weapons. Glock fully loaded, Remington clean and ready, spare magazines, tactical light, satellite phone. He paused at the door, looking back at the scene. Iris monitoring Harper's vital signs, Wade checking the windows, Phantom watching from his position by the fire. This was why he'd left the Navy. Not because he couldn't do the job anymore, but because he was tired of losing people. Tired of betrayal and politics and missions that served agendas instead of truth.
But here in this cabin protecting these people, this felt right. This felt like the purpose he'd been missing. He opened the door and stepped back into the storm. The cold hit him again, but his body was ready this time. He moved with purpose, following his own trail back toward where he'd found Harper. The snow had already begun filling in his tracks, but enough remained to guide him. 20 minutes of hard walking brought him back to the ponderosa pine where Harper had collapsed. The blood was covered now, fresh snow creating a clean white shroud. But Colt's trained eyes caught other details. Drag marks in the snow leading from the northeast. Harper hadn't walked here. She'd crawled, or been dragged. No crawled. The pattern was wrong for dragging. He followed the drag marks up the slope, weapon ready. The wind howled through the pines, snow accumulated on his shoulders and cap. His breath came in steady clouds of vapor. 50 yards up the ridge he found it. A parachute, or what was left of one. The canopy was shredded, torn by bullets, or caught in trees during descent. The lines were tangled in the upper branches of 3 different pines, blood on the snow below, a lot of it. This was where Harper had landed, where she'd been hit. Colt searched the area methodically, sector by sector. Trust your training. He found Harper's helmet cracked and bloodstained, her radio destroyed, her sidearm a Sig Sauer P226 empty magazine. She'd fired all 15 rounds at something or someone, and then he found something that made his blood run cold. A second parachute, 50 yards east of Harper's position. This one had deployed successfully, the canopy intact and spread across the snow. But no person. Just blood. A lot of blood. And drag marks leading away to the southeast. Harper Quinn hadn't been alone. She'd jumped with someone else. And that person was either dead or had been taken. Colt knelt in the snow, examining the site with professional focus. 2 sets of boot prints, both small, both military, both heading southeast before the drag marks began. 2 people had landed here. One had been killed or captured. Harper had tried to help, had been shot, had crawled away toward the only lights she could see. His cabin, 3 miles through a blizzard. The boot prints that didn't belong to Harper or her teammate were different. Larger. Multiple sets. 5, maybe 6 different people. They'd been waiting. They'd known the jump zone. They'd set up an ambush. Harper had been right. There was an insider. Someone had sold out a SEAL mission. Someone had sent these operators to their deaths. Colt followed the larger boot prints back the way they'd come. 100 yards. 200. Then he found what he was looking for. A hide site. A sniper position. 2 of them actually spaced 30 yards apart for overlapping fields of fire. Spent brass casings in the snow. 7.62mm NATO. Precision rifle fire. The shooters had set up on the ridge, waited for the SEALs to land, and opened fire. Professional, organized, military trained. This wasn't a random ambush by criminals or terrorists. This was a military operation. Colt picked up one of the brass casings. The head stamp was U.S. military issue. Lake City Arsenal. The same ammunition he used in his own rifle. American bullets. American training. American precision. Someone in the U.S. military had set this up. He was about to stand when instinct whispered a warning. A feeling. An awareness. The sense of being watched. He dove left, rolling behind a tree trunk. A bullet cracked past his previous position so close he felt the pressure wave. The sound of the shot followed a half-second later, swallowed by wind and distance. Sniper. Colt pressed himself flat against the tree, making himself as small a target as possible. His mind raced through calculations. Shot came from the northwest. 200 yards, maybe 250. Suppressed weapon, but the supersonic crack of the bullet gave away the direction. He'd been followed, or they'd been watching the crash site waiting for someone to investigate. Another shot. This one hit the tree 3 inches from his head, spraying bark fragments. 200 yards. Bolt-action rifle, judging by the time between shots. Good shooter. Not great, or Colt would already be dead. But good enough to be dangerous. He needed to move. Staying here meant dying, but moving meant exposing himself. And his Remington, while excellent for long-range precision, wasn't ideal for snap shooting while running through a forest in a blizzard. The Glock, then. Close the distance, use the terrain and weather. Colt took 3 deep breaths. Steady himself. Muscle memory taking over. Execute. He broke from cover, sprinting at an angle, using trees for concealment. Another shot cracked past, hitting snow where he'd been. The shooter was tracking him, but the storm and distance were working in Colt's favor. He ran 40 yards, dove behind a boulder, paused. No shot. The shooter had lost visual. Colt used the moment to circle north, flanking toward where he'd estimated the shooter's position. His years as a scout sniper had taught him to think like his opponent. Where would I set up? What's the best hide site? How would I react if my target went mobile? 3 minutes of careful movement brought him to a rocky outcrop with a good view of the valley. No shooter, but fresh disturbance in the snow. Boot prints, size 11, leading away to the northwest, moving fast. The shooter had broken contact. Chose discretion over engagement. Smart. Colt knelt, examining the position. More spent brass. A protein bar wrapper, a small thermos cap. The shooter had been here for hours, watching, waiting. For Harper, or for whoever came looking. The wrapper had a label. Cliff Bar chocolate chip flavor. Available in any grocery store in America. The thermos cap was stainless steel, no markings, nothing identifying, but the boot print was distinctive. Lower Zephyr GTX, mid-height, a popular choice among special operations personnel, the kind of boot Colt himself had worn on deployments. He pulled out his satellite phone and photographed the prints, the brass, the hide site. Evidence. Maybe it would matter later. The storm was getting worse. Visibility was down to maybe 10 yards. The cold was penetrating even his layers. His fingers were starting to lose feeling. Time to get back. He turned toward the Callaway cabin and froze. A sound. Faint. Almost lost in the wind, but unmistakable to someone with his training. An engine. No, multiple engines. Snowmobiles. Coming from the north. Heading toward the cabin. Colt started running. Colt covered the 1.5 miles back to the Callaway cabin in 18 minutes. His lungs burned from breathing frozen air at a full sprint. Pain radiated from old wounds with each pounding step, but the sound of those snowmobile engines pushed him forward with adrenaline-fueled urgency. He burst through the tree line 50 yards from the cabin and dropped to one knee behind a snow-covered log. His breath came in ragged clouds. He steadied himself, muscle memory taking over. Assess before acting. See the battlefield. 3 snowmobiles sat silent in the clearing. Arctic cat models, black paint barely visible under fresh snow. No riders. The engines were still warm, melting the snow around the exhaust ports. They'd arrived maybe 5 minutes ago. Colt scanned the cabin. Lights still on. No visible damage. No bodies. But the front door stood slightly ajar and Wade's truck had been moved, deliberately positioned to block the back exit. Professional work. These weren't amateurs. He moved in a wide arc, approaching from the east where the forest came closest to the cabin. Every sense heightened. Every shadow a potential threat. The Remington felt heavy in his hands, the weight both burden and comfort. 20 yards from the structure he saw the first body. A man lay face down in the snow near the woodpile. Late 30s, athletic build, dressed in winter tactical gear. Black Gore-Tex jacket, cargo pants, lower boots, the same boots that had left prints at the sniper hide. Wade Callaway stood over him, 12-gauge Mossberg still pointed at the man's back. Wade's left arm hung limp, blood soaking through his sleeve. But his eyes were alert, and his finger rested outside the trigger guard with practiced discipline. Colt approached low and fast. Wade's head turned slightly, recognizing the movement pattern before seeing the face. 3 of them, Wade said quietly. His voice was strained with pain, but steady. Came in fast. Thought we were civilians. Found out different. Status. This one's down. Iris has the second one at gunpoint in the main room. Third one ran when Phantom went after him. Headed northeast. Dogs chasing, but he's hurt. Can't keep up. Colt felt ice form in his chest. Phantom was out there alone, injured, chasing an armed operator through a blizzard. I'll get him. You good? Flesh wound. Through and through. I'll live. Wade gestured with his chin toward the cabin. Girl's still stable. Iris pulled her into the safe room when they came through the door. The safe room. A reinforced interior closet Wade had built years ago. Steel door deadbolt stocked with supplies. A firefighter's insurance policy against the unpredictable. Colt moved past Wade to the cabin entrance. He cleared the doorway with textbook precision rifles sweeping the angles body armor he didn't have, making him feel exposed. The main room showed signs of brief violence. A chair overturned, medical supplies scattered, blood on the floor. But Iris Calloway stood in the center, her Sig Sauer P320 held in a two-handed grip, pointed at a man sitting on the floor with his hands zip-tied behind his back. The man was younger than the one outside, maybe 30, clean-shaven, short dark hair. No visible insignia, but everything about him screamed military. The way he sat despite the restraints, the way his eyes tracked Colt's entrance, calculating angles and distances. He was reaching for his weapon when I put 2 rounds in the wall next to his head, Iris said. Her voice carried the flat calm of someone making a medical report. He reconsidered his options. Colt moved to check the safe room. The steel door was closed, the deadbolt engaged from inside. He knocked twice, paused, knocked once, their old signal from deployments when radio silence was necessary. The bolt slid back. The door opened a crack. Iris's headlamp illuminated Harper Quinn's pale face. She was conscious now, propped against the wall, Iris's Glock 19 held in shaking hands pointed at the door. "Friendly," Colt said. Harper's finger moved off the trigger. Her eyes, though clouded with pain and medication, held recognition, the understanding between operators who'd survived combat together. "Status?" she asked. Her voice was weak, but the question was pure seal. 3 hostiles. 1 down outside, 1 secured, 1 fled. We're handling it." She nodded once, then sagged against the wall. The effort of staying alert was costing her everything. "Stay here," Colt said. "Keep that door locked." He secured the safe room and returned to the main room. The bound man watched him with professional assessment. "You're making a mistake," the man said. His accent was American. Midwest, maybe. "That woman is a traitor. She stole classified equipment. We're here to retrieve it." Colt didn't respond. He knew interrogation tactics, building rapport, establishing a narrative, trying to shift the moral framework. Instead, he knelt and went through the man's pockets. No wallet, no ID, but a tactical radio clipped to his vest earpiece still in place. Colt removed it carefully and handed it to Iris. "See if you can monitor their frequency." She nodded and moved to the kitchen table where their own equipment was spread. Colt continued his search. The man carried a SIG MCX rifle suppressed, night vision monocular, 3 30-round magazines, flex cuffs, a combat knife, a satellite phone encrypted and locked. Standard loadout for a direct action team. Nothing identifying, nothing trackable. Ghost protocol. "Who do you work for?" Colt asked. "I'm a federal contractor, providing security services." "For who?" "That's classified." Colt stood. "You came into a private residence, armed, in the middle of the night. You engaged civilians. That's not security work. That's assault." "We had authorization." "From who?" The man's jaw tightened. He said nothing. Iris looked up from the radio.
"They're using military encryption. I'm getting fragments. They know one of their team is down. They're regrouping, waiting for orders." "How many?" "At least 3 more voices. Maybe 4. 6 to 7 operators total. 3 accounted for. 3 to 4 still active. Bad odds, but Colt had faced worse." Wade came through the door, his left arm now bandaged. Blood had soaked through already, but the flow had slowed. His face was pale, but determined. "Dog tracks head northeast. Deep snow. The runner's leaving a clear trail. Phantom's prints are right behind him, but spaced further apart. He's falling behind." Colt felt the decision weight settle on his shoulders. Stay and defend the cabin against multiple trained operators, or go after Phantom and risk leaving Iris, Wade, and Harper vulnerable. Before he could speak, the radio Iris was monitoring crackled to life.
A voicemail authoritative with a tone that commanded automatic respect. "Shadow 3, this is command. Report status." Silence. The bound man stared at the radio but said nothing. "Shadow 3, respond. We show your beacon stationary. Confirm situation." More silence. The voice changed. Harder now. Colder. "All shadow elements abort and extract.
I repeat, abort and extract. Asset is confirmed KIA. No witnesses. Execute Protocol Black. The transmission ended. Colt and Iris exchanged a look. Protocol Black. Military slang for sanitizing an operation. No evidence. No survivors. The bound man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear. He knew what was coming. "They're going to kill everyone here," Colt said quietly. "Including you. Can't have witnesses who know what you look like." "That's not—" "Save it. I've run Black Ops. I know how it works. You're expendable now, just like we are." The man's Adam's apple bobbed. He knew Colt was right. Iris moved to the window. "Movement, northeast and west. They're flanking." Wade racked the shotgun. "We can't hold this position. Not against trained operators with night vision and automatic weapons. This cabin's made of wood and hope. Won't stop rifle rounds." He was right. The Callaway cabin had been built for shelter against weather, not combat. Single-pane windows, pine log walls that would splinter under sustained fire. One entrance, one exit. A kill box. Colt made the decision. "We move. There's an old mining cabin 2 miles north. Stone walls, one entrance. Defensible. Wade, can you drive?" "With one arm in this storm." Wade smiled grimly. "I've done worse." "Take your truck. Iris, you and Harper go with him. I'll take the snowmobiles, lead them away, circle back to provide cover." "Alone?" Iris shook her head. "That's suicide. It's misdirection. They'll follow the engine noise, think we're running. By the time they realize it's a decoy, you'll be fortified." "And Phantom?" Colt's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed to go after his dog. But the mission came first. Save the wounded. Protect the helpless. Complete the objective. "I'll find him after you're secure." Wade was already moving, gathering supplies. Ammunition, medical kit, water, food. Moving with the efficient speed of someone who'd evacuated from wildfires, who understood that hesitation killed. Iris went to the safe room and helped Harper out. The young SEAL could barely walk, leaning heavily on Iris's shoulder. Her face was grey with pain and exhaustion, but her eyes were clear. "I can fight," Harper said. "You can barely stand," Iris replied. "Save your strength." They moved toward the back door where Wade had already started his truck. The engine rumbled to life, diesel clatter loud in the mountain silence. Colt turned to the bound man. "You're coming with us. Insurance policy. They'll kill me anyway. Then you've got nothing to lose by talking." He cut the zip ties and recuffed the man's hands in front. Easier to move, harder to fight. Then he marched him outside and into the truck bed, securing him to the roll bar with additional restraints. The man's eyes tracked the forest, looking for his team, calculating odds. But he didn't call out, didn't resist. Maybe he believed Colt. Maybe he knew betrayal when he saw it coming. Iris climbed into the passenger seat, Harper between her and Wade. The girl's head lolled against Iris's shoulder. Fever was setting in. Infection despite the antibiotics. The wounds needed proper surgical intervention. 2 miles north, Colt said through Wade's window. "Old Morrison mine. You'll see the tailings pile on your left. Cabin's another 100 yards past that. Stone foundation. Heavy timber roof. Only one door." Wade nodded. "What's your play?" "I take 2 snowmobiles. Make noise heading east. They'll think we're running for the highway. I loop back, pick up Phantom's trail, meet you at the mine. And if you don't make it, then you hold that position until SEAL team arrives. Harper got a message out 18 hours ago. They'll come. Should be here by dawn." Dawn? In this storm with these roads that was still hours away. But it gave them a goal, a timeline, hope. Iris leaned across Harper. "Colt, don't be a hero. We need you alive." "I'm not a hero. I'm just a stubborn old SEAL who doesn't leave his people behind." He stepped back and slapped the truck twice. Wade put it in gear and rolled forward, headlights cutting through the falling snow. The truck's 4-wheel drive bit into the accumulation and pulled them toward the forest road that led north. Colt watched until the taillights disappeared into white chaos. Then he turned to the 3 snowmobiles. He fired up 2 machines, letting them idle loud and rough. Obvious. Deliberate. Then he triggered the 3rd snowmobile's ignition and wedged a stick against the throttle. The engine screamed, the machine lunging forward into the forest riderless, making a racket that would carry for miles. Colt mounted the 2nd snowmobile and took off, heading east toward the highway that was 20 miles away through mountain passes. He rode hard for 5 minutes, carving a clear trail through fresh snow, then killed the engine and dismounted. Silence rushed back in. Just wind and the fading echo of the runaway snowmobile crashing through underbrush somewhere ahead. He waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Movement to the west. Shadows resolving into forms. 3 figures moving in tactical formation, weapons ready. They paused where Colt's trail diverged from the trucks. A brief consultation. Hand signals. 2 broke off to follow the snowmobile tracks. 1 headed after the truck. Good enough. Colt moved back toward the cabin on foot, circling wide to avoid the operators. His Remington was slung across his back. The Glock was in his hands now. Close quarters. Fast shooting. The kind of work that required a different weapon. He reached the cabin 10 minutes later. The front door still stood open. Snow had drifted inside, covering the medical supplies and scattered furniture with white shroud. Phantom's tracks were visible leading northeast. Deep paw prints, uneven spacing. The left rear print barely registered. The dog was running on 3 legs, the injured limb unable to bear weight. And following those tracks, heavier boot prints. Size 11. Lower boots. The runner Shadow 3 had chased into the forest. Colt started tracking. The trail led uphill through dense pine forest where the snow was shallower under the canopy. Easier going, but harder to see. Colt moved with the patience learned over 2 decades of reconnaissance work. Fast is slow. Slow is smooth. O is...
Smooth is fast. Half a mile in, he found blood. Dark drops on white snow, but not Phantom's prints. The boot prints. The runner was injured. Another quarter mile and the tracks showed a change. The boot prints became erratic, stumbling, and Phantom's prints closed the distance. Colt's heart rate increased. His dog had caught up. But what happened then? He found out 50 yards later. The runner lay in the snow, not moving. Phantom stood over him, teeth bared, a low, continuous growl rumbling from deep in his chest. The dog's left rear leg was held completely off the ground now. His breathing was labored, but his amber eyes burned with focus. The runner's rifle lay 10 feet away. His hands were empty, raised slightly. He didn't move. Smart man. German shepherds trained for military work didn't bluff. Colt approached from the side, weapon ready. Phantom, hold. The dog's ears swiveled, but he didn't look away from his prisoner. Perfect discipline despite pain and exhaustion. Colt circled to where he could see the runner's face. Young, maybe 25. Blood ran from a deep bite wound on his right forearm. His eyes were wide with fear and cold, and the understanding that he'd made a fatal mistake running from a combat-trained K9. Hands behind your head. Lace your fingers. The young man complied. Colt moved in, patted him down. No sidearm, no knife, just the rifle he'd dropped when Phantom had taken him down. Name. I want a lawyer. Colt pressed the Glock's muzzle against the back of the man's head. Not hard, just enough to feel. This isn't an arrest. This is a combat situation. You came onto private property, armed, engaged civilians, tried to kill a Navy SEAL. Name. Now. Miller, Sergeant First Class, Army. Who's your commander? Miller's mouth clamped shut. Phantom growled deeper. His patience was wearing thin. Last chance. Who sent you? Colonel Reeves. Colonel Vincent Reeves. But we didn't know. We were told she was a traitor, that she stole... The name hit Colt like a physical blow. Vincent Reeves. His mind reeled back 12 years. Kandahar province. A compound raid gone wrong. Taliban fighters pouring from hidden positions. His team pinned down. Building collapsing from RPG impacts. And Vincent Reeves, then, a lieutenant colonel with Army intelligence running through gunfire to pull Colt from the rubble. Reeves performing CPR while mortars walked closer. Reeves calling in the extract while dragging wounded SEALs to the LZ. Reeves staying calm when everyone else was dying. Reeves had saved Colt's life, had saved 6 other men that day, had been awarded a Silver Star for valor under fire, and now that same man had sent a kill team after a Navy SEAL. Where's Reeves now? I don't know. He coordinates remotely. We never see him. Just get orders and target packages. How many more teams? This is it. 7 of us. Plus the colonel monitors from wherever he is. 7. 3 accounted for at the cabin. This one made 4. 3 still operational, but split up now chasing false trails. Colt needed to move. Wade and Iris would reach the mine in another 20 minutes. They'd be vulnerable during approach, and 3 trained operators would figure out the deception soon enough. He zip-tied Miller's hands behind his back and took his radio. Then he looked at Phantom. The dog was trembling now, adrenaline wearing off, pain and exhaustion taking over. His left rear leg was swollen badly, the old injury pushed beyond its limits. Colt knelt beside him. Good boy. You did good. Phantom's tail wagged once weakly, his tongue lolled out breath coming in pants. He'd given everything, gone beyond the pain to complete the mission, just like every military working dog Colt had ever known. There was no way Phantom could walk out, not 2 miles through deep snow in this condition. Colt looked at Miller. "Can you walk?"
"I think so." "Then you carry my dog, and if you drop him or hurt him, I will shoot you and leave you for the wolves. Clear." "Clear." Colt helped Miller to his feet, then carefully lifted Phantom and draped him across Miller's shoulders. The dog whined, but didn't struggle. Trust. Even now, even with a stranger carrying him, Phantom trusted Colt's judgment. They started back toward the trail that would lead north to the mine. The radio on Colt's belt crackled. "Shadow 2, Shadow 4, report position." Colt kept moving. Let them wonder. Let them waste time searching. 10 minutes of hard walking brought them to the forest road. Wade's truck tracks were clear heading north. But there were other tracks now too. Boot prints. One set. Following the truck. Shadow 5. The operator who'd split off from the others. Colt increased his pace. Miller struggled to keep up, carrying Phantom's 70 pounds while hands tied and injured.
But fear motivated him. Fear of being left behind. Fear of the man with the gun at his back. The Morrison mine tailings appeared through the snow, a massive pile of rock and debris from a century of copper extraction, now just a landmark in the wilderness. The mine itself had collapsed decades ago, but the foreman's cabin remained built solid from stacked stone and heavy timber. Colt saw Wade's truck parked behind the cabin, smart positioning, used the building for cover, protected from direct fire. But he also saw fresh boot prints approaching from the west. Shadow 5 had arrived ahead of them. Colt grabbed Miller and pulled him down behind a fallen log. Phantom whimpered softly as the movement jostled his leg. "Stay here. Don't move. Don't make a sound." He left Miller and Phantom hidden and began his approach. The cabin was 40 yards ahead. One door facing south, 2 windows both shuttered from inside. Good defensive position. But that only worked if you knew someone was outside. Shadow 5 would be setting up now, finding an angle, waiting for a shot or an opening. Colt circled wide, using the terrain and storm for concealment. He moved with predator patience, every step placed with care, every sound analyzed, every shadow assessed. He found Shadow 5 30 yards from the cabin's east wall. The operator had taken position behind a cluster of boulders, rifle trained on the door. Night vision mounted to his helmet. Professional hide. Patient. Dangerous. Colt had 2 choices. Shoot from range with the Remington risk the sound alerting the other operators, or close distance and neutralize quietly. He chose quiet. The approach took 8 minutes. Agonizing. Slow. Every nerve screaming. But SEAL training was built on patience, on understanding that speed at the wrong moment meant death. At 15 feet, Shadow 5 shifted position, adjusting his aim, settling in for a long wait. Colt closed the final distance in 3 seconds. His left hand clamped over Shadow 5's mouth. His right hand drove the combat knife up under the ribcage, angled toward the heart. One thrust. Professional. Efficient. The way he'd been trained 25 years ago. Shadow 5 struggled for 3 seconds, then went limp. Colt held him until all movement stopped, then lowered the body quietly to the snow. He took the man's night vision and radio, added them to his collection. Then he moved to the cabin door and knocked. 3 times. Pause. Once. The door cracked open. Wade's 12-gauge muzzle appeared first, then Wade's face pale and drawn but alert. "Clear," Colt said. Wade opened the door fully. Colt entered the cabin and secured it behind him. The interior was sparse. 1 room. Stone fireplace. Heavy shutters on both windows. Iris had set up a medical station in the corner where Harper lay on a makeshift bed of blankets. The girl was unconscious again, fever flushing her cheeks. "How is she?" Colt asked. "Holding on, but barely. She needs a hospital." "She'll get one. Soon." Colt moved to Wade. "I need you to help me with something." 10 minutes later, Phantom was inside the cabin, resting near the fire. Miller sat against the wall, still zip-tied, watching everything with haunted eyes. And outside, Shadow 5's body remained where Colt had left it, visible to anyone approaching. A message. Colt checked the radio he'd taken. The frequency was active, voices conferring. The other 2 operators had realized the snowmobile chase was a decoy. They were regrouping, heading back. It was only a matter of time before they found this place. Iris joined Colt at the window. "How long do we have?" "Hour, maybe less. And then we find out if 4 civilians and a wounded SEAL can hold off trained operators in a siege." 5 civilians, Wade corrected. "Don't sell yourself short." Colt smiled without humor. 5 then, against at least 2, maybe more if Reeves has reinforcements." "You really think it's him, Vincent Reeves?" Miller confirmed it, and it makes sense. Reeves has access to classified information. He knows how operations work. He'd know how to set up an ambush, who to bribe, what equipment to steal. Why? He was a hero. Silver Star, Bronze Star with valor. Why turn? That was the question Colt couldn't answer. The Vincent Reeves he'd known had been a man of absolute integrity, a soldier who'd risk everything for his people, the kind of leader men followed into hell because they trusted him completely. What could turn a man like that into someone who'd betray SEALs? The radio crackled again. A new voice. Older. Authority in every syllable. A voice Colt recognized immediately. Colt Brennan, I know you're listening. This is Vincent Reeves. We need to talk. Colt stared at the radio in his hand.
Vincent Reeves's voice, unchanged after 12 years, carried the same commanding tone that had once rallied a dying team in Kandahar. The same voice that had talked Colt through his first kill. The same voice that had promised over whiskey in a forward operating base that brothers never leave brothers behind. Iris watched him, her combat medic instincts reading the tension in his shoulders. You don't have to answer. But Colt's thumb was already pressing the transmit button. I'm listening, Colonel. A pause. Then Reeves spoke, and something in his voice carried weight beyond words. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. You weren't supposed to be involved in this. None of those people were. This was a clean operation until Quinn ran. Clean. Colt's voice was flat. You ambushed a SEAL team, killed 4 operators, hunted a wounded woman through a blizzard. That's your definition of clean. You don't understand the whole picture. Then explain it. Another pause. Longer this time. Wind howled outside the cabin, rattling the shutters. Phantom lifted his head near the fireplace, ears swiveling toward the radio as if recognizing threat in the transmitted voice. Lieutenant Harper Quinn stole classified technology, Reeves said. A prototype encryption device worth $200 million in development costs. Intelligence suggests she planned to sell it to a foreign power. I was tasked with recovery, by any means necessary. Wade exchanged a glance with Iris. Miller, still zip-tied against the wall, kept his eyes down. Colt looked at Harper's unconscious form. She'd barely spoken since he'd found her. Certainly hadn't mentioned stealing anything. But SEALs operated on need to know. If she'd gone rogue, she wouldn't advertise it. So you sent a kill team instead of military police. The technology cannot fall into enemy hands, and Quinn has proven herself willing to kill to protect it. My men were authorized to use lethal force if necessary. Your men opened fire on parachutists before they hit the ground. That's not recovery protocol. That's assassination. Silence on the radio. Colt had scored a point. Whatever story Reeves was selling, it had holes. I don't expect you to understand, Reeves said finally. You've been out of the game too long, living in the woods, playing hermit. The world moved on while you were hiding from your past. The words landed like physical blows, designed to. Reeves knew Colt's psychology, knew about the PTSD, the guilt over men lost, the retreat into isolation. Maybe, Colt said. Or maybe I got out before I became what you are. A man who murders American service members for money. Money! Reeves's voice sharpened. You think this is about money? Isn't it Miller mentioned your remote? Coordinating from somewhere safe while your men do the dying. Sounds like a man protecting himself, a man with something to lose. You know nothing about what I've lost. The transmission ended abruptly. Iris moved to Colt's side. He's rattled. You got under his skin. He's also stalling, keeping us talking while his men maneuver. Colt moved to the window and peered through a crack in the shutter. Dawn was maybe 90 minutes away. The storm showed signs of weakening. Visibility was improving to nearly 50 yards, which meant their defensive advantage was eroding. Wade joined him. 2 approaches. Front door or the east window. We can't cover both adequately with our numbers. Then we don't split up. We funnel them to one approach and stack our firepower there. Which approach? Colt studied the terrain visible through the window. The east side had heavy timber close to the cabin. Good concealment for attackers. The south side, where the door faced, was more open. 40 yards of relatively clear ground before the forest. Harder to approach unseen. We board up the east window. Force them to come through the door or try the south window. Either way, we see them coming. Wade nodded and moved to gather tools and materials. Despite his wounded arm, he worked with efficient speed, pulling boards from an old supply cache in the corner and hammering them across the east window frame. Colt turned to Miller. How do they usually operate? What's their standard assault pattern? Miller hesitated, loyalty warring with survival instinct. Your team left you behind.
Colt said quietly. Reeves called abort and extract. That means anyone still on the ground is expendable, including you. Miller swallowed. We use two-man teams. One provides covering fire while the other advances. Leapfrog pattern, standard military. But they've got better equipment than you. Night vision, suppressed weapons, body armor. How many grenades? 2 each. Fragmentation. Colt processed this. 4 grenades total, assuming the 2 remaining operators were fully equipped. Enough to breach the door or blast through a window. The stone walls would hold, but the wooden door wouldn't. He needed to change the equation. Iris, how's your rifle work? She looked up from monitoring Harper's vitals. Rusty, but I qualified expert in the army. Why? I need a sniper, someone who can cover the approach while I maneuver. Where are you going? To hunt the hunters. Wade stopped hammering. Alone? That's suicide. No, that's doing what I was trained for. SEALs don't defend. We attack. Colt moved to his pack and began pulling equipment. Extra magazines. Tactical knife. The night vision he'd taken from Shadow 5. You 3 hold this position. I'll circle behind them. Catch them in a crossfire. And if you don't come back? Then you hold until SEAL team arrives. Harper got a burst transmission out 18 hours ago. They should be here by dawn. Dawn. The timeline was getting tighter. But it gave them hope. A goal. Something to fight toward. Colt checked his weapons one final time. Glock fully loaded. Remington cleaned and ready. The familiar weight settled into his hands like old friends. Pain radiated from his shoulder where the old shrapnel injury lived. But his mind was clear. He moved to Phantom and knelt beside the dog. The German shepherd's amber eyes met his with understanding that transcended species. They'd been through this before. The goodbye before a mission. The unspoken promise to return. Stay. Guard. Phantom's tail thumped once against the stone floor. Colt stood and moved to the door. Iris caught his arm. Vincent Reeves saved your life once. Can you kill him if it comes to that? The question hung in the cold air. Could he? Could he put a bullet in a man who'd given him CPR, who'd carried him out of a collapsing building, who'd been like a father when Colt's own father had abandoned him? I don't know, Colt said honestly, but I'll do what needs doing to protect the people in this cabin. He opened the door and stepped into the pre-dawn darkness. The storm had diminished to light snow. The wind had dropped to maybe 10 miles per hour. Clouds overhead showed breaks where stars pushed through. Visibility was improving rapidly. Colt moved northeast away from the cabin, using the terrain to mask his departure. He covered 200 yards before circling back west, positioning himself to flank anyone approaching from that direction. The night vision changed everything. The world became green-tinted shades of grey. Trees resolved into stark detail. Movement became obvious. Heat signatures stood out against the cold background. He found his first target 8 minutes later. Shadow 2, based on the radio call sign. The operator had taken position behind a fallen log 100 yards from the cabin. Professional hide. Good sight lines to the door. Rifle equipped with suppressor and thermal scope. Colt watched him for 3 minutes, looking for patterns. Checking for a backup, confirming Shadow 2 was alone. Then he began his stalk. The approach took 12 minutes. Moving when Shadow 2 adjusted position. Freezing when the operator scanned his surroundings, using every depression and tree and shadow to mask his advance. At 20 feet, Colt saw the problem. Shadow 2 wore body armor. Level 4 plates front and back. A headshot would be necessary, or a knife to the throat. Both required getting closer. Colt closed to 10 feet. 8. 6. Shadow 2 shifted, some instinct warning him, but too late. Colt's left hand clamped over the man's mouth. His right hand drove the combat knife into the side of the neck, severing the carotid artery and jugular vein. One thrust. Silent. Professional. Shadow 2 struggled for 5 seconds, then went still. Colt held him until all movement ceased, then lowered the body carefully and took his equipment. Another radio. Night vision. Thermal scope. The operational picture was getting clearer. One operator remained. Shadow 4. The radio crackled. Shadow 2, report status. Silence. Shadow 4, confirm visual on target building. Negative. No movement. But I've got thermal on the chimney. They're inside. Hold position. Wait for my signal. Roger. Colt triangulated Shadow 4's position from the radio transmission. Northeast of the cabin. Elevated position. Probably on the ridge that overlooked the mine.
He started that direction, moving with renewed urgency. Dawn was maybe 40 minutes away. Once full light came, his advantage evaporated. The climb up the ridge took 15 minutes. His lungs burned in the thin mountain air. Pain flared with every pull up the steep terrain. But SEAL training had taught him to push past discomfort, to find reserves when the body said quit. He crested the ridge and went prone, scanning with night vision. There. Shadow 4. 200 yards northeast. Elevated position behind a boulder outcrop.
Perfect sniper hide with clear view of the cabin below. But as Colt watched, something changed. Shadow 4 stood abandoning his hide. He moved down the ridge at speed, heading toward the valley floor. Something had spooked him, or he'd received new orders. Colt followed, maintaining distance, weapon ready. Shadow 4 reached the valley and turned south, moving parallel to the cabin but staying in tree cover. His path would take him around to approach from the rear where Wade had boarded up the window. Smart. Flank the defenders. Hit them from an unexpected angle. Colt increased his pace. He needed to intercept before Shadow 4 reached the cabin. 50 yards from the structure, Shadow 4 stopped and keyed his radio. "Come on, Shadow 4. I'm in position for breach. Confirm execute." Reeves's voice responded immediately. "Negative. Hold position. We're trying something else." "Roger. Standing by." Colt was 30 yards behind Shadow 4 now.
Close enough to hear the operator's breathing, close enough to see him shift weight from foot to foot, waiting for orders. Then new movement caught Colt's eye. A figure approaching from the north, walking openly, no weapon visible, hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. Colonel Vincent Reeves. Even after 12 years, Colt recognized him instantly. Taller than average, broad shoulders, the confident stride of a man accustomed to command. His hair was grey now where it had been dark before. His face showed lines that hadn't been there in Kandahar. But his eyes, visible even at this distance in the growing dawn light, held the same intensity. Reeves stopped 40 yards from the cabin door. "Colt Brennan," he called out. His voice carried clearly in the still morning air. "I'm unarmed. I'm here to talk. Just talk." Inside the cabin, Colt imagined the scene. Iris and Wade positioning themselves. Harper, maybe conscious enough to understand. Everyone wondering if this was a trick. The door opened a crack. Wade's voice emerged. "State your business." "I want to speak with Colt, man to man. No weapons, no threats, just conversation." "He's not here." "Yes, he is. I know him. He circled behind my men. Probably took out Shadow 2 by now. Shadow 5 is already down. Colt's out there somewhere watching. Listening." Reeves turned, scanning the forest. "Aren't you, son?" Colt's finger rested on the Remington's trigger. Center mass shot. Easy at this range. One pull, and Vincent Reeves died. But something stopped him. Not sentiment. Not old loyalty. Curiosity. Why would Reeves expose himself like this? What did he gain from a face-to-face meeting? Colt stood and stepped out from tree cover rifle trained on Reeves. The colonel turned to face him fully. His hands remained raised. No weapons visible. But Colt knew Reeves was too smart to come truly unarmed. Ankle holster, probably. Maybe a knife. "There he is," Reeves said. Something like genuine warmth touched his voice. "My best student. You've gotten older, Colt. Grayer. But I'd recognize that walk anywhere. Stop talking like we're friends. You sent men to kill me. I sent men to retrieve stolen property. You chose to get involved. That was your mistake." Colt advanced slowly, weapons steady. 40 yards became 30, 25. "Why are you here, Colonel?" "To offer you a choice. Walk away. Take your friends. Leave Quinn and the equipment. I'll let you go. No pursuit. No consequences. You have my word." "Your word." Colt's voice dripped contempt. "The word of a man who ambushed a SEAL team, who murdered 4 operators. What's that worth?" Pain flashed across Reeves's face. Genuine pain, not acted. "You think I wanted this? You think I chose to become what I am? Everyone has choices. Not when they have your family. Not when they threaten everyone you love." The admission hung in the cold air. Colt processed it. "Someone has leverage on you. Someone made you do this." Reeves laughed bitterly. "Made me? No. Gave me an impossible choice. Yes, my daughter Colt, my Sarah. She's being held by the same people who want that encryption device. They told me deliver the device in Quinn's body or Sarah dies. What would you choose?" The question landed like a gut punch. Colt had known Sarah Reeves, had met her at a military ball 12 years ago. She'd been 15 then, bright, funny, planning to become a teacher. She'd had her father's eyes. If that's true, why not go to the authorities' FBI, military CID? They could help. These people are the authorities, or connected enough that it doesn't matter.
You think I didn't try? I went to everyone. No one believed me. No one would help. So I'm helping myself, the only way I know how. Shadow 4 had moved closer during the conversation, Colt noted peripherally.
Now positioned at an angle where he could shoot Colt without hitting Reeves. "Tell your man to stand down," Colt said. "He's just insurance. You know how this works. I know you're lying. Some of it anyway. Maybe not about Sarah, but about Quinn. She didn't steal anything, did she?" Reeves's expression hardened. If she'd stolen a prototype device, you'd have said what it does. Encryption isn't worth 200 million. Quantum computing, maybe. AI weapon systems. But you didn't give specifics because you don't know. You were fed a story just like your operators. Someone wanted Quinn dead and used you to do it. Silence. Reeves's jaw worked. His hands lowered slightly. "Who benefits if Quinn dies?" Colt pressed. "What did she discover? What did she see?" From inside the cabin, Harper's voice emerged, weak, strained, but clear. "Project Nightfall." Both men turned toward the door. Harper stood in the opening, leaning heavily on Iris. Her face was grey. Blood had soaked through her bandages, but her eyes burned with focused intensity. "Lieutenant Quinn," Reeves said, "you should be dead. Lots of people should be dead, but we're not, because Project Nightfall isn't about encryption, it's about assassination." Colt kept his rifle trained on Reeves, but his attention shifted to Harper. "Explain." She coughed, wincing with pain. Iris tried to pull her back inside, but Harper shook her off. "I'm SEAL Team 5 Intelligence. My team was tasked with retrieving documents from a compromised safe house in Montana. We found files, classified, way above our clearance. They detailed a program called Nightfall, targeted killings of American citizens, journalists, whistleblowers, politicians, anyone who threatened certain interests." "Whose interests?" Reeves demanded. "Defense contractors, intelligence officials, people who profit from endless war and surveillance." The files showed 53 planned assassinations over 3 years, 17 already completed and staged as accidents or suicides. Colt's mind raced. "You're saying there's a conspiracy to murder American citizens on American soil?" "I'm saying I have proof. Encrypted files I downloaded before my team was hit. That's why they want me dead. Not because I stole a device, because I know the truth." Reeves shook his head slowly. "That's impossible. I was told—" "You were lied to." Harper cut him off. "Just like your operators, just like everyone. Someone in that conspiracy found out about the safe house breach. They needed a clean team to eliminate us. They used you. My daughter is probably already dead, or never was kidnapped. Think about it, Colonel. When did they contact you right after we retrieved those files? How did they know to use your daughter as leverage because they have access to classified personnel records? They knew everything about you, including your weaknesses." Reeves's face had gone pale. His hands trembled. The confident commander was cracking reality, punching through the story he'd been told. "Where are the files now?" he asked quietly. "Hidden, encrypted, multiple copies. If I die, they automatically release to journalists and Congress. Then you're still a target. Forever. They'll never stop hunting you." "I know. That's why I need to go public. Testify. Bring everything into the light." Colt watched this exchange, his rifle still trained on Reeves, but his mind assembling pieces. If Harper was telling the truth, this went beyond a simple theft. This was institutional corruption at the highest levels. And if Reeves had been manipulated, he was a victim too. A weapon aimed by people who understood exactly which buttons to push. Shadow 4's voice crackled over the radio. "Command, do I have clearance to engage?" Reeves's hand moved toward his radio. Colt's finger tensed on the trigger. "Don't," Colt said softly. "Don't make me kill you. If I stand down, Sarah dies. If Sarah's alive, we'll find her, together, the right way. But if you give that order, you die here, and she dies anyway." The moment stretched. Wind moved through the pines. Snow fell in soft whispers. Two old soldiers facing each other across 25 yards of Montana wilderness, their past friendship a ghost between them. Reeves's hand stopped halfway to the radio. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't lose her." "Then trust me, like you did in Kandahar, like I trusted you when you pulled me from that building. We're still brothers. We can still do the right thing." Reeves's eyes met Colt's. In them, Colt saw exhaustion and desperation and the terrible weight of impossible choices, but also something else. Hope. Fragile and wounded, but there. The radio crackled again.
Command respond. Do I engage? Reeves's hand moved to the radio. He keyed it slowly. Shadow 4. Stand down. Mission abort. Return to extract point. Sir, confirm abort. Confirmed. We're done here.
Silence on the radio. Then Shadow 4 emerged from the trees, rifle lowered, moving toward Reeves with confusion evident in his body language. But as he approached, Phantom appeared. The dog had somehow slipped out of the cabin despite his injury, had limped through snow to reach his handler. Now he stood between Colt and Shadow 4, teeth-bared body trembling with exhaustion, but stance unwavering. Shadow 4 hesitated. His rifle started to rise. A shot rang out. Shadow 4 went down, rifle falling from his hands. Iris stood in the cabin doorway, her Sig Sauer still raised smoke wisping from the barrel. "Nobody points a weapon at my friends," she said calmly. Reeves froze his hand still on his radio. Phantom limped forward, placing himself directly between the two men. "Don't," Colt said quietly. "Don't make me watch my dog get shot protecting me from you." Reeves's hand fell away from the ankle holster Colt could now see. His shoulders sagged as if a massive weight had lifted. "What now?" he asked. Before Colt could answer, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors cut through the morning air. 2 of them, big birds, coming fast from the south. Everyone turned toward the sound. Over the ridge, 2 UH-60 Black Hawks appeared, Navy markings. SEALs didn't use Black Hawks typically, but for a rescue operation in mountain terrain, they'd use whatever was available. The helicopters circled the cabin once, then began their descent into the clearing beside the mine. Reeves looked at Colt. "How long did you know they were coming?" "Harper's burst transmission went out 18 hours ago. I figured they'd get here by dawn." Dawn had arrived at exactly the right moment. The helicopters touched down. Doors opened. 6 SEALs emerged in full tactical gear. Leading them was a man Colt recognized even through the years. Chief Garrett Stone. Older now. Harder. But unmistakably, the same operator who'd served with Colt in Iraq. Stone approached with weapon ready, but not aimed. His eyes took in the scene. Colt, Reeves, Harper in the doorway, Shadow 4 bleeding on the ground, the tactical situation clear in seconds. "Lieutenant Quinn," Stone called, "we're here to bring you home." Harper sagged against Iris relief, finally breaking through her combat discipline. "About damn time, Chief." Stone's attention shifted to Reeves. Recognition flickered. "Colonel Reeves, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder of naval personnel." 2 SEALs moved to secure Reeves. He didn't resist, just looked at Colt one more time. "My daughter. Please, find her." Colt nodded once. "I will." They took Reeves away. Stone approached Colt, hand extended. "Brennan, heard you'd gone hermit. Didn't expect to find you in the middle of this." Colt shook the offered hand. "Wrong place, wrong time. Or right place, right time." "Quinn would be dead without you." Stone looked toward the cabin where medics were now attending to Harper Wade and Phantom. "We'll need statements from everyone, but first, let's get the wounded stabilized." The next hour passed in controlled chaos. Medics worked on Harper, stabilizing her for transport. Wade's arm wound was cleaned and properly bandaged. Phantom was examined, his leg splintered professionally, medication administered. Iris stood with Colt outside the cabin, watching the SEALs work with professional efficiency. "This isn't over, is it?" she asked. "No. Project Nightfall is still active. The people behind it are still in power. Harper has evidence, but getting it heard will be a war in itself." "And Reeves's daughter. I meant what I said. I'll find her." Iris looked at him for a long moment. "You spent 12 years in these mountains hiding from the world. Looks like the world found you anyway. Maybe. Or maybe I was hiding from myself. From the idea that I still had something to contribute." "And now?" Colt watched as medics loaded Harper onto a stretcher. The young SEAL caught his eye and nodded once. Respect, gratitude, the silent communication of warriors who'd survived together. "Now I finish what we started. For Reeves, for his daughter, for every name on that Nightfall list." Stone approached, tablet in hand. "Brennan, I need your statement. Everything that happened. Everything you saw." Colt looked at the rising sun breaking through the clouds, painting the Montana peaks gold and rose. The storm had passed. The valley lay pristine and white and beautiful in the morning light. "It's a long story, Chief. We've got time. And coffee. Come on." They walked toward the helicopter where a mobile command post was being set up. Behind them, Phantom limped out of the cabin, refusing to stay inside. The dog positioned himself near Colt, as he always did, as he always would. Iris and Wade stood together, watching the military operation transform their quiet wilderness into a temporary base. Wade's good arm was around Iris's shoulders. Inside the helicopter, Colt began his debrief. The facts came easily. The timeline, the tactical details, the physical evidence. But when Stone asked about Reeves about the confrontation, Colt hesitated. "He's not the enemy," Colt said finally. "He's a victim, used by people who knew exactly how to manipulate him." "Maybe. But he still gave the orders. Men died. Men died because someone lied to him about his daughter. Find her. Prove she's alive or dead. Then judge him." Stone made notes. "The investigation will determine that. Right now, we focus on Project Nightfall. Quinn's evidence could bring down some very powerful people." "That's what I'm counting on." The debrief took 2 hours. By the time they finished, the sun was fully up, and the temperature had risen above freezing. Snow melted in patches. Water dripped from trees. Stone closed his tablet. "You're going to be famous, you know. Old retired SEAL saves wounded operator, uncovers conspiracy. Media will love it." "I don't want famous. I want justice." "Sometimes you get both." Colt stood and moved to the helicopter door. Phantom limped over to join him. Together they looked out at the mountains they called home. "What are you going to do now?" Stone asked. "Finish this. Find Sarah Reeves. Help Harper testify. Make sure the people behind Nightfall face consequences. That's not a one-man job. Good thing I won't be alone." He looked at Iris and Wade still standing near the cabin, at Phantom beside him, at Harper being loaded for medical evacuation but still alive, still fighting, at all the people who'd stood together in the storm. "We're not soldiers anymore," Colt said. "We're not active duty. We're just people trying to do right. But sometimes that's enough." Stone smiled. "You sound like a SEAL again." The helicopter carrying Harper lifted off rotors, thundering. It banked south toward the nearest major hospital toward proper care and safety. The second helicopter would take Reeves to custody, to questioning, to the beginning of a long legal battle that would determine whether he was a criminal or a victim. Colt walked back to the cabin where Miller still sat zip-tied and uncertain of his fate. The young sergeant looked up as Colt approached. "What happens to me?" "That depends. You were following orders, but you shot at American citizens, invaded private property. The question is, will you testify against whoever gave those orders?" Miller swallowed hard. "If I testify, I'll be a target, just like Quinn." "Probably, but you'll also be on the right side. That counts for something." "Does it in the real world?" Colt thought about the question, about all the compromises and betrayals and impossible choices that had led to this moment. About Reeves broken by the threat against his daughter. About Harper hunted for discovering truth. About himself hiding in the mountains from a past that wouldn't stay buried. "I don't know," he admitted. "But it's all we've got. Being on the right side, doing the hard thing because it's right. That has to mean something, or we're lost." Miller nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll testify." Stone's people took custody of Miller, read him his rights, began the formal process that would turn him from operator to witness. Colt returned to Iris and Wade. "You two saved lives today," he said. "Harper, me, maybe even Reeves by keeping him from crossing a line he couldn't uncross." Wade shrugged. "We did what neighbors do, what family does." "Family?" Colt tested the word. He'd been alone for so long he'd forgotten what family felt like. "Yeah, I guess we are." Iris smiled. "Took you long enough to figure it out. You're staying for breakfast. No arguments." "Breakfast sounds good." They walked back toward the cabin. Phantom limped beside Colt, occasionally leaning against his leg for support. The dog was exhausted, injured, but alive, still fighting, still loyal, just like his handler. 3 days later, Colt received a call from Stone. "We found her. Sarah Reeves, alive. She was being held in a warehouse outside Reno. The kidnappers scattered when Nightfall started collapsing. She's shaken but unharmed." Colt closed his eyes, relief washing through him. "Does Reeves know?" "I told him myself. First time I've seen a man cry in interrogation." "Will it help his case?" "Maybe. He still gave the orders, but intent matters. The prosecutors are considering reduced charges, possibly even immunity if he cooperates fully against the Nightfall conspirators." "Good. He deserves a chance. He deserves what the law decides. But yeah, I hope it works out for him too." That evening, Colt sat on the Callaway cabin porch with Phantom. The dog's leg was healing. The vet said he'd walk again, maybe even run, but the limp would never fully disappear.
We're a matched set, Colt said, scratching behind Phantom's ears. Both of us broken. Both of us still fighting. Phantom's tail thumped against the weathered wood. His amber eyes held that ancient understanding between soldier and dog, the bond forged in combat, the loyalty that transcended words. "Good boy," Colt whispered. "Best damn partner I ever had." The sun set over the Montana peaks, painting the snow crimson and gold. Somewhere Harper Quinn was testifying before Congress, her encrypted files finally being heard. Somewhere Vincent Reeves sat with his daughter, holding her close, grateful for a second chance. Somewhere the people behind Nightfall were scrambling to cover their tracks as their conspiracy crumbled. But here, in this moment, there was only peace. Colt Brennan, retired Navy SEAL, had found his way home. Not to a place, to a purpose.
And that made all the difference. Inside, Iris called out that dinner was ready. Wade's voice joined hers, telling some story about fighting wildfires that made Iris laugh. The sound of family, the sound of belonging. Colt stood Phantom rising beside him. Together they walked into the warm cabin, into the light and laughter and love that waited there. The war never ended. It just changed forms. But Colt had learned something in these Montana mountains, something important. You don't fight alone, you fight with family. And family isn't something you're born into, it's something you choose. And Colt Brennan had finally chosen well.